Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. My name is Charisse Walker, and I'm your host of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. This is a place where we come together to learn, grow, and inspire. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. Today we have Lesle Lane in the house, and we are going to talk about being in business, being a mom, having your kids be in the business or not in the business, and how she has been able to build the business that she worked with her parents. And there's going to be so many different conversations we have. My name is Charisse Walker, your host. And Lesle, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am Lesle Lane. I am a corporate photographer in Indianapolis, Indiana, with three generations of amazing mompreneurs that were behind me. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you. So how did you get into corporate photography?
Well, my mom and my stepdad ran a very similar business to what I'm running now, just changed with modern times and things like that. So the corporate side has always been my business. They call it an assignment photographer. We're going to achieve a specific goal, where my grandparents were portrait wedding photographers. And so they did the things that were more B2C. I'm only in the B2B space. My dad and my mom did it for 40 years, and now I'm 30 years into my cycle of it.
Wow. And your kids, they're not involved, right, in it?
They are not involved in the business, but when I was raising them, photography, whether it's portrait and wedding or whether it's corporate, it's one of those amazing career choices that you can have your children in the business while you're raising them. You have openness and opportunities to attend the things you need to attend because you make your own schedule. And so my children were raised in my business as they were babes and growing up. Me and my siblings were with my parents in their business, and then my mom was in the business with her parents as they were raising her, because each generation did it out of their home. And so it really has been an amazing legacy of people figuring out a way to balance to the best of their ability, just because of what photography really offers people.
That's true. So how are you involved, or how did you get your kids involved? Like when you were growing up, how did you help your parents, and then how did your kids help you?
Interesting story. I always knew that I was going to be in photography. Now, they checked my brothers out first because commercial photography really is a boy job, but neither of my brothers wanted to take it up. And so my parents gave me a camera when I was 6. And I started very early on attending conventions with them. I was shooting when they were out shooting. And so I went to college to get a degree, but I got it in liberal arts. But then I was the yearbook photographer while I was there. So it's always been something that I was in with. My children never really cared very much about participating in the business, but once they found out they could get paid, well, now that was a different story. And so they started assisting me at about the age of 12 or 13, that they would come on jobs with me. They were always speaking to my clients, which was an amazing way for them to be raised. They, had to say their please and thank yous, and they were eating lunch with clients and having adult conversations. So for me, that was a great way to raise them, and then to have them go on location with me. But once they went off to college and got their own degrees, they wanted nothing to do with it, until my longtime assistant passed away unexpectedly and left me really upside down. Like I didn't know what I was going to do. And so my oldest daughter decided to quit her job. She was looking for another position to spend more time with her child. And so she came on as my administrator. She helped me with strategy and planning of how to basically recreate my business without a key personnel, and how to do that in a way that was going to help me and become a better photographer, but also a better business person. There's just not enough of me to go around to be the primary producer and do everything else. And so my daughter came on board for 2 years, and she helped me completely revamp the business.
Wow. So she did get involved.
She did, but she was, as she said, short-term contract.
Yep. Okay, so let's talk about that, because you'd mentioned when we were talking earlier that your parents did the wedding photography and the family type stuff, and you've gone to the corporate. How did you make that switch? What made you decide to pivot?
Well, my grandparents did the portrait wedding.
Oh,
So
okay.
my mom and my stepdad always did the corporate.
Oh, okay.
So that the problem was they wanted me to do weddings because that's what girls did.
Yeah.
And I had no interest in it whatsoever. But a huge transition in our business was from film to digital. So that was coming along when my stepfather became ill. And so pivoting from that as a 20 something girl, where the first digital camera cost $200,000,
Wow.
more than my first house did. Figuring all of that out during the time that the business was transitioning from my parents to me, that was probably the biggest pivot moment that I've had in my career.
Wow. That's amazing. I didn't know that cameras cost that much.
The
So,
first ones did, yes. The very first ones were quite expensive because you couldn't use any of the gear you already had. So
mhm,
you had to buy new cameras, new lenses, new lights,
mhm.
everything. And they were so big, as everything was back then, that even the tripod wouldn't hold the camera. So there was no part of it from film that could transition to digital at all. So you just had to start over.
Wow. And now they're like tiny, right?
Yeah, I had to buy two new cameras last month, and I didn't even break 10 grand to get two new cameras. I'm like, this is fantastic.
Wow, that is amazing. So let's talk about that too. So I mean, from a cost perspective, to have to invest 200,000 and now it's a difference of 10,000. How did you get your business? I mean, were you charging more back then than you do now to be able to cover that?
Absolutely. So we're one of the few industries that the value of our services has actually gone down. So think about the people that would have to shoot film. It took science, it took math, f-stops and shutter speeds. The film had to be processed properly. And if you didn't know what you were doing, you get a roll of film back and you don't have anything on it. And so the mental ability to know how to capture those images on film, it gave us more value. My dad used to say it was like the wizard. Nobody really knew what happened behind the curtain. And as digital cameras have gotten smaller, faster, easier to use, well, some people think the skill set has gotten less. Whether it's true or not, certainly the marketability of how much I can charge is less than it was back in the 90s and early 2000s.
Hmm. Yeah, because
Mhm.
everyone thinks
Yeah,
they know how to do it. I
they
don't.
do. No, most people don't, but you know.
I I tried. I'm a real estate agent, and there was one time where hiring a photographer, I was super new to the business, and so my client's like, "You have to hire a professional." I'm like, "I'm not going to hire a professional. I'm just going to go buy a camera." So I did. I went and bought an expensive camera in my world, right? $800, and I take pictures, and she's like, "These are horrible. You didn't hire a professional." And so then I found out hiring a professional was like $150. I'm like, "Why didn't I do that instead of buy my
The
camera?"
$800 camera.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, now it's not a no-brainer. Like, I don't even try to do my own because it's such a different, there's no way I can do it the way that they do it. And the equipment really is different too.
The equipment is different, and I think that now people are beginning to understand that everywhere we go, we're promoting our brand.
Hmm.
As a realtor,
Yeah.
whatever your business is, whether you're selling widgets or selling something else, or it's a brand, and that goes on LinkedIn, that goes into, I mean, everybody sees how you represent yourself. And so I think people are seeing that there is a need for professional photography. Thank goodness for now.
Mhm. Yeah, I've even had pictures done and said I don't even like the photographer and hired a different photographer because of it, and then never called the other person back because.
Yeah, I mean, it's a connection. And I think that people underestimate the personality of the person behind the camera
Mhm.
can completely reflect what the
Right.
person in front of the camera is doing. And so I like to connect with people. I like to make them feel good about themselves and create something that makes them happy with how they look.
Yeah, I agree. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about you being a woman in a man's world. In commercial photography, you'd mentioned that it's very dominated by men. And so how
Mhm.
did you break into it? How do you um I don't know how I'm trying to say this because I think sometimes women get intimidated because of it, and other women are like, "Yep, I'll take on the challenge and go for it." So how have you set yourself apart and created a name for yourself in a male-dominated world?
Yeah, back in the 90s when I took this over, I was the first female photographer. And like I said, my stepfather was not really keen that I was going to be able to do it. And unfortunately, he got taken out of the business with a stroke. And so it was either me or close the business down. I was never one to shy away from a challenge. As a competitive ice skater, that ice is unforgiving. You know, you fall on your butt. I've still got the bruises and the bones to prove it. What I did not anticipate is that even though being in a man's world is difficult, staying in a silo when you're a female entrepreneur in a male dominated business, you need to be around other strong females. And if there aren't other strong females in your industry, you need to go to another industry, not leave the industry, find mentors that can talk to you about being the only woman at the table. Because what happened is I was so in my own world, raising children, paying mortgages, I had employees, I had all that, that I became very hard. And of course, a woman that's hard is getting called the names that are not appropriate to say everywhere, instead of being called strong or leaders or, assertive. They get called derogatory names for that. And so about 10 years ago, I started networking with women in commercial real estate. And those are women that have to fight every day for pay disparity, that they have to go to the table where the male brokers are more dominant and, they have to fight their way up. And once I started hanging out with those ladies and seeing how they handle it, it really was a game changer with me. So not just helping me be in a male dominated area, but also having a whole variety of cheerleaders, people that wanted me to succeed, that wanted to pass referrals to me, and that wanted to be a part of my world since I was as strong as they were. So I think that I just would encourage your listeners, if you are in a field that there aren't a lot of women, find someone, several someones that are strong and can give you the support that you need.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want listeners to hear, oh, we're anti-men, because I'm not like
Mm-mm,
that at all.
mm-mm.
Men serve a purpose, and my husband I love. And so I don't want people to think that it's, oh, men are not good or something. It really is different. Like when I was in the proprietary education industry, I remember I went and interviewed, it was in Baltimore, and this man was a very Italian, very strong, big guy. And I was sitting there and he's just like, well, I don't think you have what it takes to run a multi-million-dollar industry. And I said, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but here's why you're wrong. And I ended up getting the job, right? But I think that so many times, because of our gender, we are looked over sometimes, or we are looked down upon. One of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody calls me sweetie, or or like, oh, there's another one that I totally put it out of my head because it makes me so mad. But it's those type of things where sometimes I don't think they intend to. It's just, but other times, it's a way of showing I'm above you. And so if we can be strong and confident by surrounding ourselves with other women that have that confidence, then I think that we can help get ourselves out of it, just like you did. So I think that that's fantastic.
I agree with you completely. And the other thing that happened for me is when I started surrounding myself with strong women, I started finding male advocates
Mhm.
because strong women attract male advocates. And certainly that was not a term I was familiar with when I was in my little silo. But I really feel like that there are so many men out there that want you to succeed,
Yeah, yeah.
but they're not going to be the ones that are around the weak women.
Mhm.
Strong men that are confident in themselves, that have been raised by strong women, that have been in that household.
Yeah.
They like women. They like women a lot.
The word is kiddo that I was going to say.
Kiddo.
I'm like, at the time I was 45 years old and my broker was calling me kiddo. I'm like, okay, it's time to go to a different broker. So,
Yes, I think you're right.
yeah, that's where, we have to be confident. And I love that because there are a lot of men that are advocates that are your biggest cheerleaders. And they're like, okay, we want to see you succeed. And so surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals is so important.
Yes, and I have just a quick funny story. When I was young and I was hard, I was not easy to be around. I'm not going to say that I was. And I have stayed friends with many people from those times. And I ran into a guy about 2 months ago, and I said, "Hey, how are you?" And he puts his arm around me. And I said, "I know, I was kind of difficult to deal with." And he just looked at me and he goes, "What in the world were you supposed to do?" He said, "Nobody took you seriously. Nobody gave you any credit whatsoever." He said, "I don't think a thing about it, and I am really proud of you."
Oh, that's so
And so
nice.
you just sit back and you're like, he saw it. He saw
Mhm.
that I had no choice, but I still wonder if maybe I could have handled it a little bit better. But heck, I was 20 years old. What did I know back then?
I know. I started teaching college at 22, and I mean, these guys are old enough to be my dad, and I'm supposed to be teaching them something. And some of them were really respectful, and others were not. But eventually, I mean, I ended up getting instructor of the year because of the respect that they all had. And so
hmm
you really do have to stand up on your own. And sometimes they think, oh, she doesn't know anything, right? Especially when you're younger and you're more attractive. So you're still attractive, but okay, so let's talk about technology
Yeah.
because what have you done with technology? Have you gone with the mainstream? Have you not? What have you done as times have changed?
Well, I think that it's a very interesting time in my industry.
Mm.
So, a thing about technology is that when cameras started being in phones, that was the same time of the last Great Recession. It could not have hit my industry any harder
Oh,
because you've got both the disruption of the economy and the disruption of the industry. It was, I mean, and I was getting a divorce at the same time. So, I
oh,
mean, like it was a triple whammy.
wow.
So here we are now, and the next big disruptor is AI, of course, that is what everybody's talking about. In fact, I'm kind of sick of hearing about it out in the world. It's like there's not another topic going on, but I understand why people are concerned about it. So the cameras that I just purchased, the latest technology from Canon, even in those cameras, they have things like eye sensing software. They
Oh,
have the ability to enhance the file size through special processing that will take the files from 50 megapixels, 50 megabytes to like a terabyte. There's so much in this little bitty piece of equipment that is computerized, artificially generated after the fact. And then you go into Photoshop, and now Photoshop can generate things. Right now, it's a tool, and I'm using that tool to be more effective, to separate myself from my competition by delivering things faster, more efficiently, by getting things done that the client doesn't want to do. Clients that call me and say, "Okay, I need you to take out that logo." And I can do that, or I can have my service do that, or whatever I need to be done. So I feel like if you're a photographer and you're not paying attention to what's going on in your portion of the industry. So I'm a commercial generalist. I work for all kinds of companies. I shoot many different things. I don't specialize in one type of corporate photography. And so I'm keeping my ear to the ground as to what my clients expect. I am seeing a push for transparency. I am seeing a reduction in retouching on people's faces because they want their audience and their buyers to know that this is what they really look like. They don't want to look like an artificially generated image. I shoot product photography. Packaging is being taken off the shelves at retailers if they are using artificially generated images. They feel that it is a falsehood to show a product that's not real.
mm.
So for now, my buzz on the street is the technology needs to be used to be more efficient, more creative, create a product that your clients are asking for. And we're not quite yet to the drone uprising where they're going to take us over yet.
It's interesting because, again, with my real estate photography, sometimes my clients' yards aren't the prettiest, like their grass isn't. And so I always get these pictures back from the photographer, and the grass is perfectly green. And I'm like, okay, I love that. But now I have to go in and say, this was digitally changed. Can I have the real picture? Because I want to be able to show, yeah, this is what it could look like, but this is what it really looks like. Because otherwise, it's false advertising. And I have to, photographer added this, and sometimes they'll give me the picture, sometimes they won't. And so, again, choose your client or who works for you. And But it is interesting how AI has really changed the industry. For me, it's made it a lot less time consuming, so it's good. But other times, yeah, you're right. It can get faster, but you have to be careful with it as well, I think.
Very much so. And in commercial real estate, they don't want you to clean any of that up.
Yeah.
When
Mhm.
it's going on the market, they want it as is. So I just think again, and maybe AI is taking a little bit different route in my world, in the portrait wedding world.
Mhm.
You know, maybe when you have a picture of a bride and groom and they'd really rather be in front of the Eiffel Tower, maybe that's what they're doing. But in my world, we're not there yet.
Yep, that's good. That's good. So, what is your plan with your business? I mean, because you've been in it for 30 years, right?
Have, yes.
Are you planning to stay another 20, or what's your plan once in the next 10 or 15 years?
So in the past 3 years, I've scaled the business differently. So I now have about 9 associates that shoot and do different things with me. Every employee that I have is a contract worker. They are a 1099 employee. I have everything from administrators, social media people, photographers, assistants, videographers, drone people. And so I've taken the business from just being a sole producer to
Okay.
being a multi-producer business. So my goal, I work in higher education a good bit, so I'm going to different schools, capturing their marketing and advertising photography, and it never fails. Somebody at each college will ask me if they can have a conversation with me, and so that's a lot of where I'm getting my pipeline of new people to come in. I'm hoping that I might cultivate a successor. Certainly, I've got a mentee at my alma mater, Butler University here in Indianapolis. I've picked up a couple of other students through different universities, and I hope that I will find somebody that I can pass on my information to, my knowledge, my client base, my look, my style, my feel. But I do have every intention. I'm young enough that I still plan on being here 10 to 15 years from now.
Mhm.
But I sure would like to have somebody in place for the last 5 years that we can start transitioning to somebody else. So we'll see if that all happens. Maybe one of my grandbabies will want
That's
it.
true, actually. Don't count that one out. I love that because some people, the attitude is, well, nobody can take over, so we're just going to close the business. And it's like, what are you doing? Because you're right. The fact that you've scaled and you've hired other people and you're training them, so you could actually have them working for you while you don't have to go out all the time. And then I mean, that is like a golden egg to say, I'm wanting to give somebody everything that I have and learned. That is a huge gift that I hope that your successor realizes, um, and you can still have uh, I was going to say like passive income coming in while you're not having to do.
Mhm.
And then eventually, would you consider selling the business, or would you?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I would. I feel like when I said my daughter came in, I mean my daughter came in. So we've got standard operating procedures, we've got manuals, I've got a board of directors. I mean, everything
Oh,
is in order so that I'm not just saying, here's a client list. I am saying, here's how to run this business successfully. And as we add new positions, I'm now thinking about having a digital asset manager that will help me manage the workflow because that's the latest thing that I'm struggling to keep up on. And so we write a standard operating procedure for every new role we bring into the business. And as things change, we update it. So we've really been working quite hard to make sure that this business has something to pass on other than what's in my brain.
I love that. Good job. All right, so I have a different question for you, which is completely different. Let's transition to moms for a second. And I want you to imagine yourself sitting on a park bench and you're enjoying your grandkids are playing, right? And this 9 month pregnant woman comes and sits next to you and you start having a conversation. And so you think back from like the very first time you're pregnant, the very first till where you are now. What is one piece of advice or more if you want that you would give that new mom? If you could give her any advice as a mom.
You know, I thought about that before we came on.
Mhm.
And I was never one of those mothers that dreamed of being a mom. I was one of the, I'm driven. I'm a driven person. I knew I wanted kids, but I think I only babysat one kid. And when they laid that baby on my belly, I was a changed woman. And the problem with a driven woman having a baby is that you're driven to do everything you possibly can. You're just as driven as a mom as you are as a business owner. So all of your mompreneurs out there, if you are a type A driven person in your business, you are going to be a type A driven person as a mom. That's not bad. But what happens is that when you fail at something,
Mhm.
when you stumble, either as a mother or as a business owner, you're hardest on yourself.
Mhm.
And I think I would tell that mom, give yourself some grace. This time of childhood, it really, people say it all the time, and it sounds so cliche. It doesn't last very long,
Mhm.
and you don't get a chance to redo it. So if you stumble, just know that your 80% is somebody else's 120%.
Yeah.
That's probably what I would say. I was not very nice to myself as a young mother.
Mhm.
I always tried to do more than I possibly could. I always was hard on myself. I was hard on myself as a business person. And it's been really fun to watch my daughter parent differently. That has been truly eye-opening. And she says to me, she said, Mom, I'm parenting differently because I watched how hard you tried. And I watched how you felt insignificant and that you weren't doing enough and that you weren't achieving enough either at home or at work. And she's okay when she stumbles. And I'm grateful for that. If that's the lesson I taught her,
Mhm.
to be okay when you stumble, I consider that time well spent.
That's amazing. The vulnerability, the authenticity, but also it's such good advice because I think that we are the hardest on ourselves. I always say, "Oh, I'm such a horrible mom to you," or something, and kids don't know any different. You're their mom, so it's just they love you, and you need to love yourself as well. So I love that.
They think you're normal. Isn't that funny? They think you're normal.
Yeah. The worst thing was my daughter goes, I used to think you were my hero, but now I realize you're human. And at first I'm like, ouch. But she didn't mean it the way it came out. I asked her later, and it's just that I'm not like I'm a human being. I'm not just her mom. I'm a human, and I do stumble and I do make mistakes. So anyway.
Yeah, somebody this morning asked me, I was at a networking event, I was talking about my adult children. She asked me how old they were. And she goes, You sound like your kids are really nice to you. My adult children aren't nearly that nice to me. I said, Oh, my adult children have seen me trip over my feet and slam my face into the concrete. They're pretty gentle on me.
Oh. Well, Leslie, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And Unbreakable Moms, give yourself grace because you need that. But in addition to that, there's so many things that we talked about today, from making sure that you can stand out and have the confidence that you need to being able to go with the flow and adjust to the times that are at there and to streamline your business. So I hope that you have learned some fantastic things and go out and make it a great day. And Leslie, one more question. How
Yes.
would our listeners find you if they wanted to?
My website is studio13online.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, both as a business and as a person.
All right. Thank you so much. I almost forgot that. So, all right. Moms, make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.